Hello, Star Wars Legion has just come out, and I've been optimistically excited for it. I have to say that Imperial Assault didn't live up to the expectations I had for a big company like FFG. There are some figures in it that are amazing. The Pash, the Alliance Smuggler, is an excellent figure. I was quite impressed with the Dewback, with the Stormtrooper. But mixed in amongst some of the excellent ones are some absolute woeful ones too. The Imperial Officer in the base set is one. His hair, in his head, there's no really clear defined line where one stops and one starts. Han Solo's blaster is massive. It's well out of proportion to what it should be. Stormtroopers were another one that were just terrible. No detail on the guns. The detail on the actual Stormtrooper wasn't particularly great. And these weren't cheap figures. They weren't massively expensive, but they weren't cheap. And so when they said they were doing Legion, and the first thing is Legion's bigger, they're the 32mm scale, they said the sculpts are going to be better. And it says on the back, finely sculpted miniatures. So I have not seen them other than YouTube, and the problem with YouTube is some of the people that got them early and were painting them had to come out and say that they received resin copies, and the resins might be better than the plastic. I don't think I've seen the actual plastic ones yet. So I picked these up at Wood for Sheep, and they've just got in, I think, all of the base range of the first wave. I was hoping to get Leia, but she's not out yet. And she must be in Wave 2. I think Snowtroopers might be Wave 2 as well. They've also announced now Rebel Commandos, which look awesome with the capes, and if the detail is good on them, you'll be able to do some really nice stuff with those capes, all sorts of different camos and things like that. I've always had a massive soft spot for the speeder bikes, so I thought I would pick them up. So they come wrapped, which is nice. One thing about the Imperial Assault stuff, they come in these massively hard plastic cases. They're difficult to get into, and they're incredibly wasteful. You can't use this plastic for anything else. These come wrapped, and they come in a cardboard box, and the cardboard can, of course, be recycled, so at least that's nice about it so far. So I'm going to hack into this. Oh, that took so much less time than the old ones. So there's nice artwork on the front, and it just says 74Z Speeder Bikes Unit Expansion. Now this is not a cheap set. These things do come in around $30 Canadian. I think they're 25 US for 2 speeder bikes. They're not the cheapest miniatures out there. Makes them roughly $15 each. That might not be completely unreasonable. I would have preferred 3. I think that would have been cool, but it's really going to come down to the detail. So it's a top opening box, and it has a compartment which is going to be the miniatures, and a compartment which has the cards. So to build some rubbish suspense, we're going to have a look at the miniatures last. You get 2 bases in their own little baggie. So there's the unit markers that it uses, which will be to denote different things within the game. This is so far very similar to the other games they do, like X-Wing and Imperial Assault. And much like Imperial Assault and X-Wing, you get the larger cards, which has information related to what it is. They're double-sided. And then you get smaller cards, which is exactly like Imperial Assault. This time round, there's instructions. Okay, so my first feelings when looking at these are they're better. They're a little bit bigger, but they're definitely better. The detail on the armor, the detail on the helmet is a bit more defined. Now, are they up to the standard of Raging Heroes, the Doctor Who RPG, stuff like that? I'm not entirely sure I'd go that far. The Doctor Who range has been spectacularly good for the price, and Raging Heroes is excellent, but they are expensive. The Raging Heroes figures are quite expensive. So they're not quite as good as those, but they are quite good. Compared to the Imperial Assault ones, there's more detail in the helmet and the face. The defined areas on the helmet, like where his visor is and that, is much easier here to paint than on the Imperial Assault ones. They come with the part of the bike is holding the hands. I think there's one where they're shooting backwards. He's a commander, and I guess that must be only in the base set. I wonder if, because there's no option for that here, and there's lots of pictures of one biker being able to be with his pistol out shooting back. That must be in the core set. So far from the pilots, yeah, I'm kind of happy. There's a bit of definition. There's no areas that are completely blocky. Things like you've got to watch for is like the hands. That's where you find a lot of blockiness in sort of cheaper figures, cheaper manufactured figures. The hands are a little square, but they're all there, all the fingers, and there's enough detail, and there's ridges. It's not flat. The boots are nice. Chest plate's defined. Hip belts are defined. There's the rear saddlebag that goes on the back of the bike. They look quite nice. I mean, they're basic, but they'll paint up okay with the straps. There's a bunch of little parts here that are part of the front vanes that go on the very front of the bike. You've got to glue all of those on. That might be fun for people that don't like modelling, because these look fiddly. These look like there's not a lot of connector that's going to hold them in place, so you're going to have to be sort of careful not to make a big mess and to make sure you get enough room on there. That's a little bit of a pain, but I guess there's no real way around that. Just the shape of the front of the bikes, they are what they are, so you're going to have to watch that though, because that's going to be a bit of work. There's not much flash, so there's not going to be a lot of cleanup. There's a little on some of the guns, the two under bike cannon. There's a little cleanup on there, but not a lot. I don't see much in the way of mould lines, which is nice. Mould lines over detail can be absolutely frustrating, because there's only so much you can do depending on where they've put it, but there doesn't look to be any mould lines on the vane pieces at the front. Overall, the bikes are nice. They have a decent amount of detail. The buttons and switches are all individual and easily seen. They can be painted up individually. They're good. There's enough detail there to do each one. The seat has nice texture. The bike is a little soft underneath when it comes to detail. Not too bad, but not awesome. And there is an area here that I'll have to fill. There's a gap where two pieces have come together, and there's a gap. I will have to fill that. There's also on mine a little bit of flash near the front. It's not terrible. It's not a deal breaker. It would be nice to not have it there on a $30 miniature, but it can be fixed. There is also one rough bit. I think this is where the mould material was poured in, and that'll need sanding. One of the bikes has not much of a gap on the left hand side, and the other one has a bigger one. Both will require a little bit of filler. Overall, not bad. I'm going to build them up, get them ready for getting ready for painting, and we'll see how the build goes, because there is a bit of work for this. There's not a ton. There's not a load of work that needs doing here, but there is, all up, there's about 22 parts, so it'll take a little bit of time to do. And they're definitely better than Imperial Assault. I still think they're a little expensive for the detail point they're at, but they're an improvement. The game looks like it's shaping up to be quite popular, and these are good for the RPG. If you're doing Age of Rebellion especially, these figures are going to be cool. I will certainly be picking up some more, and I am interested in the Air Speeder for the Rebels, and certainly getting hold of the Commandos and Troopers and Snowtroopers and Stormtroopers and things like that. I'm hoping they're going to release sort of an underworld faction, and that we'll be able to see characters like Jabba and Boba Fett. And one day I'd like him to expand this a little, include more from earlier eras as well. Would be cool. Clones are great fun, and we don't see much from in clones when it comes to figures and that anymore. But for now, there's certainly a lot in the Empire era that they can draw upon. Different stormtroopers, different types of troops. The Dewbacks, it'd be nice to see them have a comeback. There's certainly some vehicles that could be used in the scale and that they're doing, and just lots of different main characters from and in different costumes too. I don't know how they would be able to work that all in, but certainly characters like Han Solo could have an early one where he's more one of the underworld factions as a smuggler. Lando Calrissian would also fit into this that mold. You could have his Bespin outfit and have him as a underworld one, or you can have him as General Calrissian. So certainly lots to choose from, and I will see how these build up. Okay, now to have a look at them after I have built them. The only thing I haven't done is their stirrups, and that's really in the build phase. It's really straightforward, except for those stirrups. It's a right pain in the butt to get those stirrups lined up. So I'm thinking of actually gluing them to their feet first and then positioning it after that. Otherwise, the rest of it's pretty straightforward. The instructions are, however, pretty woeful, and they don't really show where things are meant to line up. I had to go to some actual pictures of the speeders to get a better idea. So it would be nice if there's multi-part vehicles and that in the future, that the instructions are a little bit easier to follow. For a beginner, there's a couple of areas that could be really frustrating to people that aren't familiar with building. The front vanes, they're not too bad, but you do have to be careful, you do have to pay attention, you do need super glue. I've heard some people using plastic glue, but I don't know. I don't really trust that with this. With model kits, totally, because that's what they're designed for. But I don't think this plastic will take some of the plastic glues the same. So I think you're going to have to go with super glue or something like it. And overall, they're really good. And I have to say the quality is drastically better. I'm still not 100% convinced that the price point's completely worth it, but the thing there is that's all perception. It comes down to, if you play the game and use these guys a lot and ongoing, then the $30 is probably negligible, because over a period of a couple of years, if you play with them even once a month, you could probably, you divide how much you paid by how much you played. It probably works out okay. I do think, though, that FFG could give you a little bit better deal. But as for the figures themselves, for what they are, they're quite good. And that was one of my big concerns, and I'm happy to see that they've improved. I think they could improve a bit more, but they're not bad, and I'm not unhappy with them. They should paint up okay. The pilots, they're quite easy. They just sit on. The hands are already connected to the steering mechanism, and it connects to their shoulder. There's two different poses. They're only slightly different, but it's nice that they are slightly different. And they go into their arm. There's pegs and a hole, and they line up. When I first did it, I didn't think I needed to do any puttying. The way he's sitting at the moment, that one might, in the shoulder. I haven't glued them in. The pilots are just sitting on there because I was trying to work out how I wanted to do the stirrups. Yeah, that was a sort of important thing to decide, because once you glue it, it's sort of there. So I needed to decide what I was doing with them. So the actual scouts are just sitting on top at the moment. They're not glued together, their arms aren't glued in. And he's got a little bit of a gap on this one now, so I might have to check. But when I did them initially, they didn't need any filler, so they still might not. It just could be the way the shoulder armour doesn't sit flush with the body, and it probably wouldn't on the real one either. So I just want to make sure that the actual arm peg is all the way in and it's not exposed. If it's exposed, you've got to putty it. If it's not exposed, it's fine. Pros, 2 nice poses, slightly different, but they are different. Con, out of those poses, neither of them is the Scout shooting backwards. That must be a variant that's only in the core. It would have been nice to have had that option. Do I recommend them? Yes, provisionally. I think you really have to depend on how you're going to, how often you're going to use them and what your outlook is. Same with the painting. Dividing the time spent painting by the cost probably makes them more, probably makes them a better deal like that. But yeah, I just think FFG, big, powerful. You know, they're a powerhouse company. They could do us a slightly better deal. But overall, yeah, I'll recommend them provisionally. It really depends how you're going to use them as to whether or not it's worth dropping the money on them. But they are a big improvement over the Imperial Assault, so that's a massive plus. I'm looking forward to what they do. I'm hoping they're going to add an underworld faction like they had. And then we might see some Lando Calrissians and Boba Fett's and stuff like that. Although I would like to see at some point them expand outside of just the Empire era. I'm a huge Knights of the Old Republic fan, and I think it'd be very cool to get Sith troopers and Satine, the Jedi chickie from back then, as well as a mixture of the clone troopers. Well, I'm not even sure if they were clone troopers back there, but the Republic troopers are very interesting. And also to see some from the prequels. The battle droids would be an interesting unit to play. Lots of Jedi and stuff like that. So, but there's certainly a rich amount of figures that they can do from even the Empire era.